The sea breeze caressed her skin, the palm trees rustled overhead, and the white sand burned her bare feet. Emily Parker, 21 years old, covered her eyes with the palm of her hand as she watched her husband walk into the ocean. James Parker, 37, looked flawless, a trim body, confident movements, expensive sunglasses. From the outside, they seemed to be an ideal couple, a young, beautiful girl and a successful, charismatic man. In Emily's Instagram, their photos collected hundreds of enthusiastic comments. The exclusive Côte d'Azur resort on the Florida coast was the epitome of luxury. A private beach, personalized service, haute cuisine restaurants, everything an ordinary girl from the suburbs of Boston could only dream of. Their ocean view villa cost more than her father's annual salary. James didn't skimp on the expense. The honeymoon was going to be perfect. "Emily, come here!" James called out, waving his hand. "The water is amazing!" She waved back but didn't move. The tension between them had not dissipated, even in this paradise. Emily rubbed her wrist where there was still a faint bruise. "Accidental," as James had said 3 days ago when he'd grabbed her arm too hard after she'd had a long talk with the bartender. "Are you resting or bored?" James was suddenly beside her, water dripping from his hair. "I didn't spend a lot of money for you to sit there with a sour face." "I'm sorry. I'm just tired," Emily smiled, pulling her phone out of her bag. "Let's take a picture, shall we?" His face instantly transformed. He wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her against him a little tighter than was comfortable. Emily took a few selfies. The perfect couple on the perfect beach. "I'm going to go order us cocktails," James said when the photo shoot was over. "Don't go anywhere." The last phrase sounded like an order. Emily looked away from him and sighed quietly. She opened Instagram to post a new photo and saw a message from her sister, Rachel. "How are you doing over there? Everything good?" "Everything is great," Emily typed, attaching the photo. "A paradise place." She couldn't write the truth. How to explain that her perfect husband was turning into a completely different person once they were alone together. How to admit that she had begun to fear his gaze, his voice, his touch. "Who are you texting?" James set a glass of colorful cocktail in front of her. His voice sounded casual, but his eyes watched her reaction carefully. "With Rachel," Emily answered honestly. "She's asking how we're doing." James sat down next to her, putting his arm around her shoulders. "Your sister never approved of our marriage," he said, sipping from his glass. "She's jealous of your happiness." Emily remained silent. She knew Rachel was worried for a reason. "You don't know him at all," her sister had said on the eve of the wedding. 8 months is too short a time to be married, especially to a man twice your age." Emily wasn't listening then. She was blinded by attention, gifts, and promises. James Parker, a successful investment banker, had chosen her out of all the women. He had opened the doors to a world she knew only from movies and magazines. "What are you thinking about?" James stroked her hair, but there was no tenderness in the gesture. "About how lucky we are," Emily lied, taking a sip of her cocktail. The alcohol was dulling the constant feeling of anxiety a little. The sun was already beginning to slip toward the horizon, coloring the ocean with golden tones. The other vacationers, mostly wealthy couples and families, were slowly leaving the beach, heading for dinner or evening entertainment. "It's time to go back," James said, finishing his cocktail. "You should change for dinner. I made reservations at the Lagoon for 8. The Lagoon was the most expensive restaurant in the resort. Emily nodded, gathering her things. She wanted to cry, but she couldn't even explain why. Everything was perfect, wasn't it? Any woman would dream of being in her shoes. On the way to the villa, James held her hand. From the outside, they looked like a loving couple, but Emily could feel his fingers squeezing her palm a little harder than necessary, a reminder of his control. "It's been 4 days since we've been here, and you still don't look happy?" James said, as they entered the cool living room of their villa. "What's wrong, Emily? I've given you everything you could ever dream of." "I'm happy, really," she replied quickly. "Just a little tired of the sun." He stared at her for a few seconds, then nodded. "Take a shower and put on that blue dress I bought you in New York. It matches your eyes perfectly." Emily forced a smile and hurried into the bathroom. Only there, with the sound of the water, could she relax for a moment. The hot jets washed away the sand and salt, but couldn't wash away the growing sense of entrapment. She'd met James at a charity auction at the art gallery, where she'd volunteered after college. He bought an expensive painting and kept his eyes on it all evening. The next day, a bouquet of roses and an invitation to dinner were delivered. Emily was enchanted by his confidence, his experience, his elegance. Next to him, she felt special. No one had ever paid so much attention to her. The first alarm bells she ignored. When he checked her phone, it was concern. When he criticized her friends, he just wanted a better environment for her. When he insisted she quit her job at the gallery, it was for her own good, because she deserved better. The marriage proposal was unexpected, after only 6 months of relationship. Emily accepted without hesitation. She was in love and dazzled. The wedding was small but lavish. Emily's parents felt awkward among James's wealthy friends, but were happy for their daughter. Only Rachel kept aloof, noticing things the others didn't. Emily flinched when the bathroom door suddenly opened. James stood on the threshold, watching her through the glass doors of the shower stall. "You're taking too long," he said. "We don't have much time." Emily hastily turned off the water and reached for a towel. She felt uncomfortable under his gaze, even though they'd been married for 2 weeks. Something in his eyes made her feel like property rather than a woman she loved. While she dried her hair, James picked out jewelry for her. He controlled every detail of her appearance, from her clothes to her makeup. The blue dress fit her figure perfectly, emphasizing her youth and beauty. James himself clasped the sapphire necklace around her neck, a wedding gift. "It's perfect," he said, looking at her reflection in the mirror. "You're the most beautiful woman at the resort." Emily smiled, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. She caught herself thinking that she missed her old jeans and t-shirts, the days when it was up to her to decide what to wear and how to look. On the way to the restaurant, James talked about his plans when he returned to Boston. He wanted to buy a new house in an upscale neighborhood, introduce Emily to the right people, and help her start a rewarding career. "You don't need to hang out with those bohemian gallery friends anymore," he said. "It's petty for James Parker's wife." "But I love art," Emily objected quietly. "It's what I studied in college." James waved his hand. "Childhood hobbies. I'll help you find something more suitable, maybe interior design or organizing charity events, something that doesn't require a regular job." Emily bit her lip. She dreamed of being a curator at an art museum, working with real works of art, creating exhibitions. But James clearly saw her future differently. The Laguna restaurant was located on a pier jutting out into the ocean. Panoramic windows, exquisite service, dimmed lights. Everything created an atmosphere of luxury and intimacy. The maitre d' escorted them to a table by the window that overlooked the sunset. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," he bowed respectfully. "It's an honor to see you again." James ordered a bottle of expensive wine without even asking Emily what she wanted. He always did that. Chose for her, decided for her, spoke for her. "Here's to us," he said, raising his glass. "To our future." Emily obediently raised her glass, avoiding his gaze. The future he was planning was looking less and less like the one she'd dreamed of. A young waiter approached their table, tall, dark-haired, with a pleasant smile. He presented the menu, detailing the chef's specialties. Emily listened with interest, smiling at his enthusiasm. She didn't notice the change in James's face. "We'll have the lobster for the lady and the steak for me," he interrupted the waiter abruptly. "Medium rare, and get some more water." When the waiter left, James leaned toward her. "Did you have to flirt with him?" Emily blinked confusedly. "I wasn't flirting. I was just being polite. I saw you smiling at him." His voice was quiet, but he could hear the steel in it. "You're my wife, Emily. Don't forget that." She felt the color of shame flood her face. There were other visitors around, rich, elegant, immersed in their own conversations. No one noticed the little drama at their table. "I'm sorry," she whispered, though she knew she had done nothing wrong. The rest of dinner passed in tense silence. Emily barely touched her food, even though the lobster was cooked perfectly. Every time the waiter approached, she tried not to look at him, feeling her husband's hard stare. When dessert arrived, James suddenly smiled as if nothing had happened. "You look tired, darling," he said, covering her hand with his. "Tomorrow will be a new day. I've booked us a boat tour along the coast." Emily nodded, trying to feign enthusiasm. Each new day of the honeymoon was a challenge. She caught herself counting the days until she returned home, though she wasn't sure it would be any better there. Returning to the villa, they walked along the waterfront. The full moon was rising over the ocean, reflecting in a silvery path on the black water. Other couples strolled around, holding hands, laughing, kissing. The usual idyllic picture of a resort evening. "Look how beautiful it is," Emily said, pointing to the moonlit path. James looked at the ocean indifferently. "Beautiful," he agreed without enthusiasm. "But you need to keep the sun off your skin. Tomorrow you'll wear a wider hat." Emily felt another stab of disappointment. When they'd first met, James had seemed romantic, admiring her interests, listening to her thoughts. Now all his words were either instructions or criticism. In the villa, James went straight to the minibar and poured himself a whiskey. Emily sat on the couch, looking out the panoramic windows at the ocean. She pulled out her phone to check her messages. "Whose number is this?" James asked suddenly, looking over her shoulder. Emily flinched. She hadn't noticed him approach. "It's Mark from the gallery, asking how the honeymoon is going." James's face darkened. "Why is he texting you? Why would he want to know about our honeymoon?" "He's just a friend," Emily tried to explain. "We used to work together." James snatched the phone out of her hands and started looking through the messages. "Miss our art talk," he quoted with disdain. It sounded like he missed more than just the conversations. "He doesn't!" Emily exclaimed, trying to get her phone back. "Give it back, please!" James stepped back, continuing to leaf through her correspondences. "And here were the messages from Rachel. If anything goes wrong, call me immediately. I'll come get you." "What does that mean, Emily? What could possibly go wrong?" Emily stood up, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. "Rachel is always worried about me. This doesn't mean anything. Were you discussing me behind my back?" There was a dangerous note in James's voice. "What did you say to her?" "Nothing." Emily held out her hand. "Please give me my phone back." Instead, James threw the phone on the couch and grabbed her by the shoulders. "I gave you everything," he said, his face contorted with anger. "Pulled you out of your mediocre life, gave you my name, my money, my status, and you cheat on me behind my back?" "I'm not cheating!" Emily exclaimed in despair. "Mark is just a co-worker, a friend. I never... Don't lie to me." His fingers dug into her shoulders. "I see right through you, Emily. You think I don't notice the way you look at other men? The way you flirt with the waiters, the bartenders?" There was something scary burning in his eyes that Emily had never seen before. Suddenly she realized she was afraid of this man she'd married. "Let me go," she said quietly. "You're hurting me." James blinked, as if waking from a trance, and unclenched his fingers. There were red marks on Emily's pale skin. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back. "I didn't mean to. It's just that I love you so much that I can't bear the thought of you looking at other people." Emily wrapped her arms around herself, feeling herself shiver. "I want to go to bed," she said quietly. James nodded, then leaned over and picked up her phone from the couch. "I'll bring it to you in the morning," he said, tucking the phone into his pocket. "You need a break from social media." Emily wanted to object, but fear gripped her. She silently headed for the bedroom, feeling his gaze on her. Only when the door closed behind her did she let herself cry. Lying in the dark, staring at the moonlight streaming through the drawn curtains, Emily thought about how everything had gone wrong. How had a romantic fairy tale turned into a nightmare? Where had she made a mistake? She remembered Rachel's words. "People don't change suddenly, Em. They just stop pretending." James hadn't changed. He'd always been like that, controlling, possessive, jealous. It was just that before, he'd skillfully hidden it behind a mask of care and love, and she, blinded by attention and status, didn't want to see the truth. Behind the wall, James was talking on the phone quietly, but loud enough for her to hear the phrases. "Yes, everything is going according to plan. No, it's completely under control. Everything will be sorted out by the end of the year." Emily frowned. What is he talking about? What plan? Suddenly, she was scared. What if her marriage wasn't just a mistake, but something more sinister? She didn't fall asleep until the morning, exhausted by fear and doubt. Emily didn't know that tomorrow would be the last day of her life, that the clouds of tragedy were already gathering over the paradisiacal beaches of the Côte d'Azur. She just knew that she couldn't live like this anymore, and that she had to find a way to escape from the man she had once considered her savior, and now feared more than anything else in the world. Emily awoke to sunlight streaming in through the loose curtains. For a moment, she forgot about everything, enjoying the warmth and comfort of the luxurious bed. Then the memories of last night came flooding back, and she felt heavy again. The clock on the bedside table read 8 in the morning. James was no longer around. Emily sat up, listening. Sounds could be heard on the terrace. Her husband must have been eating breakfast there, as he did every morning. She rose slowly and walked over to the mirror. James's finger marks were still visible on her shoulders, pale but visible against her fair skin. Emily ran her fingertips over them, feeling the soreness. The eyes in the reflection stared with despair. This can't go on any longer, she thought, and the sudden decision gave her strength. Emily took a quick shower and put on a light white dress. Gathering her hair into a simple ponytail, she took a deep breath, preparing herself for the conversation that was to come. James was indeed having breakfast on the terrace. In front of him was a plate of fruit, a cup of coffee, and an open laptop. He was typing something, sipping from the cup from time to time. "Good morning," Emily said, stepping out onto the terrace. He looked up and smiled, the same smile that had once made her heart flutter. Now she saw in it only a mask. "Good morning, sleepyhead," he replied, closing his laptop. "You look rested, like last night's fight never happened." Emily was used to it. James could go from furious to normal in seconds, expecting her to do the same. "Can we talk?" she asked, sitting down across from him. "Of course, darling." His voice was soft, but his eyes remained wary. "About what?" Emily folded her hands on the table, trying to hide their trembling. "About us. About what's going on. James, I think we made a mistake." His face petrified. "What do you mean?" "This marriage," she said quietly. "We've been too hasty. We hardly know each other. And now I see things. I see things I didn't see before." James set the cup down on the table, too carefully, too controlled. "And what do you see, Emily? That you're trying to control my every move, every word, every look. That's not a healthy relationship." Something like regret flashed across his face, but it was quickly replaced by calm. "I'm only looking out for you," he said, leaning forward. "Trying to protect you. The world isn't as safe as you think it is, Emily, especially for a beautiful young woman." "But I'm not a child," she objected. "I don't need control. I need a partner who respects me and my decisions." James suddenly smiled, really without the mask. "Rachel put those thoughts in your head, didn't she? Or your friends at the gallery?" He shook his head. "They're jealous of your happiness, Emily. Don't let them ruin what we have." Emily felt a familiar wave of doubt. Could she really be ungrateful? Maybe she was exaggerating? "It's not like that," she said, forcing herself to be mindful of the bruises on her shoulders. "This is my life, and I feel like I'm losing it. Losing myself." "Nonsense," James said softly. "You're just overworked, and maybe a little too hot in the sun." He stood up and walked over to her, touching her hair gently. "Let's have a quiet day today. Let's swim. Let's rest. No arguments or heavy conversations, okay?" Emily wanted to object, but something in his gaze stopped her. She knew she couldn't get through to him now. There would have to be another time, another approach. "Okay," she said quietly. "Good girl." James kissed the top of her head. "Where's your phone?" "You took it yesterday." "Oh yeah." He pulled the device out of his pocket and handed it to her. "Here you go, but let's make a deal. No calls or texts today, just you and me, our special day." Emily took the phone, feeling relieved. At least now she had a connection to the outside world. "I'm going to change for the beach," James said, entering the house. "Order something for breakfast." As soon as he was out of sight, Emily quickly checked her phone. The battery was almost dead. James must have been looking through it all night. She hastily typed a message to her sister. "I need help. I want to get home early. Call me tonight at 9. It wasn't until she sent the message that she noticed James watching her from the doorway. Her heart sank, but his face remained calm. "Did you order breakfast?" he asked, buttoning his shirt. "I'll be right there," Emily replied, trying to keep her voice natural. She didn't know if he'd seen the message. If he had, he'd done a masterful job of hiding it. After breakfast, they went to the beach. The day was gorgeous. Bright blue sky, light breeze, perfect water temperature. If it weren't for the tension between them, it would have been a perfect day in paradise. James spread towels on the lounge chairs and pulled out a book, a biography of some financial tycoon. Emily put on her sunglasses and closed her eyes, pretending to doze off, but in her head she was feverishly mulling over a plan. Tonight, after her sister's call, she would tell James that she wanted to end the marriage. Yes, there will be a scandal, but they're in a public place. He can't hurt her. She'd ask for a private room for the night and take the first flight to Boston tomorrow. She still had her own apartment, which she hadn't had time to sell. She had money for a new ticket, too. She kept a separate account that James didn't know about. "Emily," James's voice interrupted her thoughts. "Do you want to go swimming?" She propped herself up on her elbows. "Yes, let's go." The water was refreshing, the waves gentle. For a short time, Emily almost forgot her worries, enjoying the moment. They swam side by side, their hands occasionally touching. At times like this, she could remember why she had fallen in love with him. "Look, dolphins!" she suddenly exclaimed, pointing to the horizon where their silvery backs flashed. James smiled, looking not at the sea, but at her. "You're beautiful when you're happy," he said quietly. "Like a child." Emily frowned. "I'm not a child." "I know," he replied, running his hand through her wet hair. "But you're still so innocent about so many things. That's what I love about you, the things I want to keep." In those words, Emily heard something she hadn't realized before. James didn't want a partner wife. He wanted a child wife that he could protect, control, mold to his liking. I'm going for a walk along the beach," she said, wanting to be alone. "To stretch out a little." James nodded. "Don't go too far, and wear a hat. The sun is strong." Emily obediently put on her wide-brimmed straw hat and walked along the surf line, feeling the cool water wash over her feet. She knew James was watching her from his seat, felt his gaze with her skin. Up ahead, she spotted an old man collecting shells. He picked up a beautiful pink shell and held it out to her. "For a beautiful girl," he said with a slight Spanish accent. "A memento of Florida." Emily smiled, accepting the gift. "Thank you. She's beautiful." The old man winked and continued on his way. Emily stared at the seashell, thinking that for the first time in days, she was interacting with someone other than James without fear or tension. When she returned to the chaise lounge, James was sitting motionless with a tense face. "Who was that?" he asked without looking at her. "Just an old man collecting shells. He gave me this one." Emily held out her palm with the shell. James gave her an indifferent look. "Throw it away. Who knows where it's been lying around?" "But it's beautiful." "I said throw it away." His voice became harsh. "It's unhygienic." Emily slowly lowered her hand. The shell was just a shell, but at this moment it symbolized everything that was wrong with their relationship. James wanted to control even little things like that. "No," she said suddenly. "I want to keep it." James raised his eyebrows in surprise. "What did you say?" "I want to keep the shell," Emily repeated quietly but firmly, clasping the pink shell in her palm. "I like it." James stared at her in silence for a few seconds. Then he suddenly laughed. "Well, leave it, if it's so important to you," he said, turning back to his book. "Just wash it well." Emily felt a strange satisfaction at this small victory. Perhaps she could stand up to him after all. Perhaps all was not yet lost. In the evening, James announced that they would have dinner at the hotel restaurant. Emily was glad. It was the perfect place for a serious conversation. James wouldn't be able to make a scene in public, and afterward she would ask the receptionist for a new room. She put on the blue dress that James had once called his favorite. The finishing touch was a pearl necklace, a gift from James for the day she agreed to marry him. "You look beautiful," James said as she left the bedroom. "Remind me to send a note to the designer. That dress looks like it was made for you." Emily smiled, but in her heart she felt only determination to finish everything tonight. The hotel restaurant was full. Luxurious chandeliers reflected in the polished cutlery. Waiters glided between tables with impeccable grace. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker's table," James said to the maitre d'. They were escorted to a table by the window overlooking the ocean, where the setting sun tinted the water gold and purple. "Champagne," James ordered without asking Emily. "The best you've got." Emily remained silent. Soon Rachel would call at 9 o'clock, and that call would give her the strength to do what needed to be done. "You're quiet again," James said as the waiter stepped away. "What's the matter?" "Just tired," Emily lied. "It's been a long day." James leaned toward her. "I have a surprise for you after dinner," he said with a mysterious smile. "I think you'll like it." Emily doubted that anything James had planned would please her now. She just nodded and took a sip of water. Dinner was taking place in a strange atmosphere. James was unusually attentive and generous, ordering the most exquisite dishes, telling amusing stories. If it weren't for the events of the last few days, Emily might have thought it was the perfect romantic evening. At 8:45, she excused herself and headed for the ladies' room. Locking herself in a stall, she pulled out her cell phone. At exactly 9 o'clock, Rachel called. What's going on?" Her sister's voice sounded worried. "I have to leave him," Emily whispered. "Tonight, he's becoming more and more controlling. I'm afraid of him, Rach." "God, I knew there was something wrong with him. Has he threatened you? Did he raise his hand?" "Not exactly, but—" Emily hesitated. "There have been times, and he's always checking my phone, watching my every move." "Leave right now," Rachel said firmly. "Don't go back to the room. Take a cab to the airport. I'll book you a flight." "I have my passport with me, but all the stuff in the room—" "To hell with the stuff," Rachel interrupted her. "It's all about you. Go now." Emily took a deep breath. "I will. I'm leaving right now. I'll call you from the airport." Finished talking, she looked out of the stall. No one was in the room. Emily quickly washed her face with cold water, trying to calm herself down, and headed for the exit. But James was waiting for her at the door of the restaurant. "I was getting worried," he said, taking her under his arm. "You took so long." "I'm sorry," Emily mumbled, feeling her heart pounding in her chest. "It's just a headache." "Then let's go back to the room," James said, his grip on her hand a little tighter. "You need to rest." "No," Emily objected quickly. "I mean, I'd rather be out in the fresh air. Let's take a walk on the beach." James looked at her intently. "Who were you talking to in the bathroom, Emily?" She caught her breath. "What? I wasn't talking to anyone. Don't lie to me." His voice was quiet, but there was steel in it. "I saw you pull out your phone." "James, this is ridiculous." Emily tried to free her hand. "You're following me even in the bathroom?" "I'm taking care of you," he replied, pulling her toward the hotel exit. "Now we're going back to the room. I have a surprise for you, remember?" Emily realized she had no choice. She could scream, call for help, but who would believe that her elegant, charming husband was a danger? In the suite, James finally let go of her hand and locked the door. Emily stood in the middle of the living room, feeling panic rising. "James, please," she began. "Let's just talk." "Who were you talking to?" he asked, slowly approaching her. "Was it that guy from the gallery? Or did you find someone here at the hotel?" "I was talking to my sister," Emily answered honestly. "Rachel. And what did you talk about?" Emily took a deep breath. The moment of truth had come sooner than she'd planned, but she couldn't back down. "I told her I wanted to leave you," she said quietly. "James, it's not working. We don't work together. You control my every move, my every breath. I can't live like this." James's face froze, then contorted with rage. "After everything I've done for you?" he hissed. "I gave you everything, the name, the status, the money, pulled you out of your miserable life, and this is how you repay me?" "It's not a life. It's a cage," Emily objected, backing away. "I'm not your thing, James. I want a divorce." The word divorce seemed to shatter the last of the barriers. James stepped forward sharply and grabbed her by the shoulders. "You're not going anywhere," he growled. "There will be no divorce. You're my wife. Mine." His fingers dug painfully into her skin. Emily tried to pull away, but he was stronger. "Let me go!" she screamed. "You're hurting me!" "I'm just getting started," James whispered, and Emily saw something in his eyes that she'd never seen before, absolute cold fury. He shoved her, and Emily fell, hitting the glass coffee table. A vase of flowers toppled over, drenching her dress with water. "James, please," she pleaded, trying to get up. "Let's just talk. We can work this out in a civilized manner." "Civilized?" He laughed, and that laugh scared her more than the scream. "You went behind my back planning an escape. What's civilized about that?" Emily finally got to her feet and backed toward the door. "I'm leaving," she said, trying to make her voice sound confident. "Don't try to stop me." James shook his head. "You're not going anywhere," he repeated, and something in his voice made Emily go cold. "This is our honeymoon, darling, and it will only end when I say it will." Emily rushed toward the door, but James was quicker. He grabbed her by the hair and threw her back. The pain took her breath away. "Help!" she shouted, hoping someone in the neighboring rooms would hear. "Help!" James punched her in the face, and the world went dark for a moment. When Emily was able to focus her eyes again, she saw him standing over her, clenching and unclenching his fists. "You ruined everything," he said with unnatural calm. "Everything was perfect. I gave you everything, and you ruined it." Emily tried to crawl away, but there was a couch behind her. Cornered, she did the only thing she could. She grabbed a heavy crystal ashtray off the table and threw it at James. He dodged, and the ashtray shattered against the wall. Shards of crystal flew around the room. "Bitch!" James screamed and lunged at her. At that moment, Emily realized she might not survive the night. The sun was blazing mercilessly through the wide windows of Villa Number 16 as Detective Diane Morris stepped through the threshold of the luxurious apartments. A 42-year-old woman with short dark hair and penetrating gray eyes, she'd been with the Miami Metro Homicide Unit for 15 years. She'd seen a lot over the years, but each new case still left its mark. "Wow," whistled her partner, Detective Alex Ramirez, looking around the luxurious space with white furniture and panoramic windows overlooking the ocean. $1,000 a night, no less. 1,800, Diana corrected him, checking his notebook. Plus extras. The living room was tidy, but the detective's experienced eye immediately spotted the signs of the accident. Subtle stains on the light-colored carpet, a replaced decorative pillow that didn't quite match the others, missing decorations on the coffee table. "Where's the body?" she asked the officer who met them at the door. "In the bedroom, ma'am. The medical examiner is already there." They went into a spacious bedroom with a huge bed under a white canopy. On the bed lay the body of a young woman, already covered with a sheet. Dr. Chen, the medical examiner, was leaning next to her. "Good morning, Diana," he nodded, straightening up. "Although there's nothing good about this situation." "What have we got?" Diana asked, putting on her gloves. Chen pulled back the sheet, and they saw the victim's face, a young woman with delicate features, now distorted by death agony. "Emily Parker, 21 years old," Chen said, checking his notes. "Time of death, between 20 and 22 hours last night. Cause of death is presumed to be blunt trauma to the head, followed by cerebral hemorrhage. Multiple bruises to the body, rib fractures, defensive wounds to the arms." She fought back desperately. Diana cautiously examined the body. The girl's wrists showed bruises as if someone had held her tightly. There were finger marks on her neck. The face was disfigured by the blows. "Who found the body?" she asked, straightening up. "The husband," Ramirez replied, reviewing the initial report. "James Parker, 37, investment banker from Boston. Claims he came back to the room about 12:30 at night and found his wife dead. Called hotel security right away." "Where is he now?" "He's in the next room in the care of an officer. In a state of shock, according to the doctor." Diana nodded and took another look around the room. Broken vase in the corner, overturned bedside table, bloodstains on the carpet. "Clear signs of a struggle," she observed. But parts of the room looked like someone had tried to clean up. Weird. "Maybe a cleaning service?" Ramirez suggested. "In the room where they just found a dead body? I doubt it." They continued to look around the apartment. In the bathroom, they found traces of blood in the sink and on the towels, though someone had tried to wash them. On the living room floor, shards of something glassy, carefully collected, but a few small fragments still remained in the corners. Someone was definitely trying to cover up signs of a struggle, Diana muttered. Let's talk to the husband. James Parker was sitting on the couch in the next room, hunched over with his hands on his head. A tall, well-built man with neatly trimmed dark hair and an expensive watch on his wrist. As the detectives entered, he looked up, reddened eyes, pale face, an expression of deep grief. Mr. Parker, Diane showed her badge. Detective Diane Morris, and this is my partner, Detective Alex Ramirez. We're sorry for your loss, but we need to ask you a few questions. He nodded, straightening up. Sure. I want to help find who did this to my Emily. Tell me what happened last night, Diana asked, pulling out a notebook. We got married 2 weeks ago, James began, and his voice trembled. Emily was so happy. We had dinner at the hotel restaurant last night at about 7 in the evening. After dinner, she said she had a headache and would go back to her room to rest. I decided not to bother her and went to the pool bar. I got back about 12:30 and found her. His voice broke. At what time did you break up after dinner? Diana asked, watching his face closely. About 8, maybe a little later. I didn't keep track of the time. And you were at the bar the whole time? Yes, talking to the bartender, a few guests. Had a couple glasses of whiskey. Can anyone confirm your presence there throughout the evening? James frowned. The bartender definitely remembers me. And the waiters. There were security cameras in the bar. They must have recorded me. When you last saw your wife alive, did she seem troubled? Maybe afraid of something? No, just tired and complaining of a headache. Our honeymoon was wonderful. We were so happy. Diane made a note in his notebook. Was the door broken in when you got back? No, I opened it with my key card. At first I thought Emily was asleep because the living room was dark, but then I turned on the light and saw the mess. I called out to her, got no answer, went into the bedroom and... He covered his face with his hands. She was lying on the floor. There was blood everywhere. Did you touch the body? Of course I did. I ran over to her, tried to find a pulse, give her CPR, but it was too late, so I called the front desk. Did your wife have any enemies? Maybe someone was following you or threatening you? James shook his head. No, everyone loved Emily. She was a bright person, you know, just out of college, studying art history, dreamed of being a gallery curator. How did you two meet? At a charity auction 8 months ago. She was volunteering and I was buying a painting. It was love at first sight. Valuables, money, jewelry, anything missing from the room? Nothing. My wallet, watch, Emily's necklace, all in place. Diana made a few more notes in her notebook. Did you and your wife have any conflicts? Conflicts? James tensed, but quickly pulled himself together. Just the usual family disagreements, nothing serious. Mr. Parker, Ramirez intervened. We have to check all possible scenarios. You realize that in these cases, the spouse is always considered one of the first suspects? I understand, James nodded. Do your job. I'm cooperating fully. The only thing I want is for my wife's killer to be found and punished. We'll get back to you later, Diana said as she stood up. Please do not leave the hotel without our permission. Leaving the room, Diana turned to Ramirez. What do you think? Too smooth talking, Ramirez shrugged. But the grief seems genuine. Check the security cameras in the hallway and the bar. I want to know exactly where Mr. Parker was when his wife died. I'll talk to the hotel staff. An hour later, they met again in the hotel lobby. Ramirez was holding a tablet with videos loaded on it. I've got something interesting, he said, as they retreated to a corner where no one could overhear them. A camera in the hallway captured Parker and his wife returning from dinner together, not separately as he claimed. That was at 21:30. So he lied about her leaving early? Exactly. And here's the other thing. He does leave the room around 22 o'clock, but the camera in the bar doesn't record his arrival until 22:30, half an hour in the middle of nowhere. The timing is right in line with the estimated time of death, Diana observed. What about the staff? The maid, Maria Hernandez, walked by their room at about 9:45. She heard a loud argument, a woman screaming, the sound of breaking glass, then sudden silence. We need to talk to this Maria, What about the other guests? Did they hear anything? The neighboring rooms were empty. The season hadn't started yet. The hotel was less than half full. Maria Hernandez, a middle-aged Latina with tired eyes, nervously rubbed the edge of her uniform as she sat in front of the detectives in the staff room. "I don't want any trouble," she said with a slight accent. "I have 3 kids. I need this job." "No problems," Diane assured her. "We just want to know what you heard last night when you passed Villa 16. Maria took a deep breath. "I was doing evening cleaning in the neighboring rooms. Around 10 o'clock at night, I was passing by that villa and heard loud voices. A man and a woman were yelling at each other. Then there was a loud sound like something breaking, and a woman's scream." She fell silent, swallowing. "What happened next?" Diana asked softly. I slowed down, wondering if I needed help. Suddenly the door opened and the man peeked out. He saw me and quickly closed the door. He looked very angry. I got scared and moved on. "This man, could you identify him?" "Yes, that was the husband of that poor girl, Mr. Parker. They seemed like such a happy couple before." "Used to? Did you notice anything unusual about their relationship before last night?" Maria hesitated, then nodded. "A few days ago, I was cleaning their room. Mr. Parker was gone, and Mrs. Parker was crying in the bathroom. When she came out, I noticed a bruise on her arm. She said she had hit the door, but—" Maria shook her head. "I had a sister who was always hitting doors too." "I understand," Diana said softly. "Anything else?" "He always talked to her, like a child, you know, telling her what to wear, what to eat, and she looked so sad when she thought no one could see." As Diana left the staff room, she turned to Ramirez. "The picture doesn't look good. Let's check the room again, and we need to get the phone records of both of them." Back at Villa 16, they went through every corner. In the bathroom, they found traces of blood in the sink drain, despite their attempts to thoroughly clean it. One of the towels had faint blood stains on it. "He was trying to cover his tracks," Diana muttered. Not well, but he was trying. In the wastebasket, they found a broken vase, the shards of which someone had carefully collected. Judging from the preliminary examination, it was an expensive crystal vase, weighing about 2 kilograms, heavy enough to cause serious impact damage. "Possible murder weapon?" Ramirez suggested. "It's a possibility. We should send it to forensics." In Emily's purse, they found a cell phone with a dead battery. Charging it, the detectives found several disturbing messages. "Look," Diana said, showing Ramirez the screen. "A message to her sister, sent yesterday morning. 'I need help. I want to get home early. Call me tonight at 9. And an incoming call from Rachel at exactly 9 p.m., Ramirez confirmed, reviewing the call log. "The duration of the call is 3 minutes and 27 seconds. We need to find this Rachel." Emily's sister, Rachel Collins, flew into Miami the next morning. A 24-year-old woman with a face as thin as Emily's, but with a more determined expression. She looked devastated by grief and rage at the same time. "I knew something was wrong with him," she said, sitting across from the detectives in the police station interview room. "I felt it from the beginning. He gained her trust too quickly, isolated her from friends and family. Classic abuser." "Did your sister ever complain of abuse from him?" Diane asked. "Not directly, no. But she's changed a lot in recent months. Quiet, careful with her words, always checking her phone like she was afraid she'd miss a message from him. I noticed a bruise on her shoulder once, but she said she fell." "You spoke to her last night. What was that conversation about?" Rachel swallowed, trying to hold back tears. "She said she was afraid of him, that he was becoming more and more controlling, and that she wanted to come home. I advised her to leave immediately, right from the restaurant where they were having dinner. Take a cab to the airport." She covered her face with her hands. If she had listened, if she had left in time— "It's not your fault," Diana said softly. "You were trying to help." "What happened next, after your conversation?" Ramirez asked. "She said she was leaving right away, promised to call from the airport, but there was no call. I tried calling, texting." Rachel shook her head. "And then this morning I got a call from the police." "Can you tell us more about their relationship? How they met? How things developed?" Rachel straightened, gathering her thoughts. "They met 8 months ago at a charity auction. Emily was volunteering there. She had just graduated from college and was looking for a job in the arts. James was one of the wealthy patrons. He took an interest in her, started giving her expensive gifts, taking her to exclusive events. Emily was dazzled by the attention. How quickly did their relationship develop? Lightning fast. After a month, he introduced her to his friends and colleagues as his girlfriend. 3 months later, she moved in with him. 6 months later, he proposed. I asked her not to hurry, to get to know him better, but she was sure that this was the love of her life. When were the first warning signs? Almost immediately, but very subtle. He insisted that she always returned his calls and texts immediately, criticized her friends, gently at first, then increasingly harshly. Gradually, she stopped communicating with them. Then he suggested that she quit her job at the gallery. Allegedly, she was unworthy of his wife. By the time of the wedding, Emily was already practically isolated from everyone except me, and I live in Chicago, so I couldn't see what was going on every day. Diana took detailed notes, feeling a familiar and sad picture taking shape. Have you ever seen him show aggression? Physically, no, but emotionally, all the time. He could make caustic remarks about her looks or intelligence and then laugh and say it was a joke. He could publicly reprimand her for something petty and then compliment her on it to smooth things over. Classic gaslighting tactic. As she left the interrogation room, Diana looked thoughtfully at Ramirez. The story is as old as time. Control, isolation, then violence. And more often than not, it ends in tragedy. Ramirez sighed. Do we have enough for an arrest? I think we do. The videotapes, the maid's testimony, the phone messages all point to Parker. But I want to talk to him again. Maybe he'll break down and confess. James Parker looked surprised when he was brought into the interrogation room. I don't understand what this is all about, he said, looking around. I've already told you everything I know. Not everything, Mr. Parker, Diana replied calmly, sitting down across from him. For example, you haven't told us why you lied about your movements on the night of the murder. What? I didn't lie. We reviewed the security footage, Ramirez interjected. You returned to the room with your wife at 9:30 p.m., not staying at the bar as you claimed. You didn't leave the room until 10 p.m., 15 minutes after the maid heard the woman scream and the sound of breaking glass. James turned pale, but quickly pulled himself together. There must be some mistake. Check again. We did, Diana said calmly. 3 times, and we have a witness, a maid named Maria Hernandez, who heard you and Emily arguing and saw you looking out of the room after the screaming stopped. James swallowed. Yeah, I can explain. Listening intently. Yes, we came back together. And yes, we had an argument. A simple marital spat, nothing serious. Then I actually went to the bar and Emily stayed in the room. When I came back, she was... His voice shook. She was dead. I panicked. I thought the police would suspect me, so I tried to cover up our fight. What exactly were you trying to cover up, Mr. Parker? Diane asked, leaning forward. The traces of blood in the bathroom? The broken vase? Or the fact that you killed your wife in a fit of rage when she said she wanted a divorce? James flinched. I didn't kill her. His voice suddenly grew louder. It was an accident. It was her own fault. There was silence in the room. Diana waited patiently, knowing that silence often made suspects say more than they intended. I didn't want her to get hurt, James finally said, his voice lowered to a whisper. I loved her. I just wanted her to realize that she couldn't just walk away from me. Tell me what happened last night, Mr. Parker, Diana suggested softly. The whole truth, from the beginning. James ran his hand over his face, suddenly aged a few years. We had dinner at the hotel restaurant. Emily was acting strange, being aloof. When she took a long walk to the bathroom, I suspected something was wrong and checked her phone. Saw a text message to her sister saying she wanted to come home. When we got back to the room, I asked her about it. She admitted that she wanted a divorce. He fell silent, staring into the space in front of him. Go on, Diana prodded him. I was angry. Everything I'd done for her, money, status, a future. And this is how she repaid me. I grabbed her by the shoulders. I wanted to make her listen. She pushed me away, ran for the door. I caught up with her. We struggled. She screamed, threw a vase at me. I dodged it, and then... His voice shook again. I hit her, harder than I intended. She fell, hit her head on the edge of the coffee table. I thought she'd just passed out, tried to bring her to her senses, but then I realized she wasn't breathing. So instead of calling an ambulance, you decided to cover your tracks, Ramirez concluded. I panicked, James exclaimed. It was an accident. I didn't want her to die. I just wanted her to stay with me, to be a good wife. James Parker, Diana said formally, standing up. You are under arrest for the murder of Emily Parker. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. As the officers led James away, he looked broken, finally losing his lustrous appearance and confidence. Diane watched him with a heavy feeling. Another life cut short by violence. Another story of control that turned to deadly rage.